Hey guys, it's Miss Patrick, and we are here for our day 8, 20 minutes reading of the great Gilly Hopkins. We may get close to the end today. This chapter is called The Visitor. The week before Thanksgiving, Mr. Randolph came down with the flu. It wasn't a bad case, as flu goes, but he was an old man, and any kind of sickness, as Trotter said, was harder on the old. So with many rest stops for Trotter to recapture her wind, she and Gilly brought the rollaway cot down from the attic and set it up in the dining room, turning the never-used room into a sick room for Mr. Randolph. There had been a great discussion as to whether Big Lawyer's son should be notified. Mr. Randolph was sure that if his son knew he was sick, he would be snatched away to Virginia, never to return again. Trotter recognized this appalling possibility, but maintained that there was some moral obligation to inform next of kin when one took to one's bed. Suppose he just shows up one day and finds you sick, then he won't trust you no more. He's sure to take you away then. But Mr. Randolph thought it's worth the risk, and they had compromised by having Mr. Randolph move in so Trotter could keep a close eye on him. Now what happens if you die on me? I promise not to die in your house. You have my solemn oath. Gilly, if he looks peaky, we carry him next door as fast as we can go. I ain't going to be sued by no big Virginia lawyer. Mr. Randolph raised up off the rollaway. If I die on you, you can sue me, Miss Trotter. You can take me for every cent I have. He lay back, giggling and gasping. Humph, every cent. You won't even have no Social Security if you're dead. Better not die, that's all I gotta say. I promised not to die, but with these two beautiful ladies nursing me, I made it aside to remain ill for a long, long time. Well, there's a chance I gotta take, beautiful as I am, but if you ain't well a week from today, you're gonna miss out on the turkey and stuffins. So Mr. Randolph swore a solemn oath to be well by Thanksgiving. As it turned out, he was a little better, but by then both Trotter and William Ernest were down with the bug. Trotter fought going to bed, but her fever was high, and she was too dizzy to stand up. Despite her protests, Gilly stayed home from school Tuesday and Wednesday to nurse the three of them. And Thanksgiving Day found her exhausted from going up and down the stairs and from bedside to bedside. It occurred to her that if she could get sick too, no one would blame her for collapsing, but of course she didn't catch anything except irritability from not sleeping properly and worrying. She called Mr. Randolph's doctor, Trotter's doctor, and the pediatrician, but no one gave her any help. The patients were to stay in bed and take aspirin for the fever. Gilly chopped an aspirin in half with the butcher knife for William Ernest. One piece flew out of sight under the stove, and the other piece, which she got down the boy's throat with no little difficulty, came up again promptly, along with the bowl of soup she coaxed down earlier. She was afraid to try any more aspirin. Trotter told her to wipe his face and arms and legs with a cold cloth, which seemed to help the fever a little, but the child was still miserable, and clean as she might, the smell of old vomit hung in the room. The whole house was a mess. In fact, even rooms like the living room and kitchen, which nobody but she went into, began to look as though they had been bombed. She was simply too whipped to pick up after herself. By Thursday, she couldn't have cared less about Thanksgiving. The turkey Trotter had bought was relentlessly defrosting on the refrigerator shelf, but there was nothing else to remind her as she sat at the kitchen table dressed in jeans and a shrunken t-shirt, chewing her late breakfast of bologna sandwich that the rest of the nation would soon be feasting and celebrating. The doorbell rang. She jumped at the sound. Her first fear was the lawyer's son had not believed Mr. Randolph's excuse for not coming to Virginia for Thanksgiving and had come to get him. Then with annoyance she realized that it was probably Agnes Stokes sneaking around to find out why Gilly had skipped school for 2 days. But when she opened the door, it was to a small, plump woman whose gray hair peeked out from under a close-fitting black felt hat. She wore black gloves and a black and tweed overcoat, which was a little too long to be fashionable, and carried a slightly worn black alligator bag over one arm. The woman, who was an inch or so shorter than she was, looked up into Gilly's face with a sort of peculiar expression, rather frightened or hungry. Gilly couldn't have said. At any rate, it made her shift uncomfortably and push at her bangs until she remembered two of Trotter's trusty sentences for emergency use and offered both of them. We're not buying anything today, thank you, and we're faithful members of the Baptist Church. She hurried to close the door. No, wait, please, the lady said. Galadriel Hopkins? Gilly yanked the door back open. Who are you? She blurted out, as awkwardly as William Ernest might have. It was the woman's turn to look uncomfortable. I suppose I'm your grandmother. Somehow Gilly would have been less surprised if the woman had said fairy godmother. May I come in? Dumbly, Gilly stepped back and let her. The sound of snoring poured forth from the dining room. Gilly willed the woman not to look, not to stare at the funny little brown face poked up above the faded quilt. The mouth gaped and trembling with each noisy breath. But of course the woman looked, jerked her head slightly at the sight, and then turned quickly back to Gilly. Gilly, honey, who is it? Trotter must have heard the bell. Okay, Trotter, I got it, Gilly yelled as she tugged at her shrunken t-shirt, the last half-clean one, and tried to make it cover her navel. Want to sit down? She asked the visitor. Yes, please. Gilly led the way into the living room and backed up to the couch, sticking a hand out towards the brown chair. Plunk! They both sat down in unison like string puppets, the lady right on the edge of the chair so that her short feet could touch the floor. So, the woman was bobbing her little black hat. Did anyone in the world wear hats these days? So, Gilly was trying to take it in. This little old lady in the old-fashioned hat and coat was Courtney's mother? In all Gilly's fantasies, Courtney had never had a mother. She had always been existing from before time, like a goddess in perpetual perfection. I'm right, aren't I? You are Galadriel? Her voice was southern but smooth, like silk to Trotter's burlap. Gilly nodded. My daughter, the woman fumbled in her purse and brought out a letter. My daughter left home She snapped her purse shut and raised her eyes to meet Gilly's puzzled one. Many years ago. My husband and I never... I'm sorry. Helplessly, Gilly watched the little woman stumbling for words, trying to tell a painful story and not knowing how. My husband, she tried to smile, your grandfather, died nearly 12 years ago. Perhaps she should say something about, thought Gilly. Geez, that's too bad. Yes, it was. The woman was pushing hard against the words to keep from crying. Gilly knew the trick. Oh boy, how well she knew that one. I tried to contact Courtney, your mother at the time, of course, but I was not able to. In fact, the pitch of her voice went up. She stopped trying to talk and took a handkerchief from her purse, barely touching each nostril before putting it away. Go ahead and blow, honey. It'll make you feel better. Trotter would have said it, but Gilly couldn't quite get it out. As a matter of fact, the woman had recovered herself enough to continue. As a matter of fact, this letter is the first direct word I've had from my daughter in 13 years. You're kidding, said Gilly. She felt sorry, even though the woman's pain didn't seem to have anything to do with her. I didn't even know she had a... Wouldn't you think she'd want her own mother to know she'd had a baby? This was obviously the point where she, Gilly, was supposed to come into the story, but it still seemed far too remote, like something that had happened once to a friend. She tried to nod in a sympathetic manner. Gilly, I called you and called you. William Ernest stood clutching the doorway for support, his face still flushed with fever. He was dressed with his long grayish-white underwear. At the sight of a stranger, he stopped dead. The woman looked at him once hard, then as she had done with Mr. Randolph, she looked quickly away. I'm sorry, W.E., Gilly said. I didn't hear you call me. What's the matter? As soon as she asked, she knew. His long johns were wet, all down the front. Gilly jumped up. Excuse me, I'll be right back. She hustled the boy back to his room as fast as you could hustle a boy who was still weak from fever and lack of food. It was hard to be patient with him on the stairs. You shouldn't have come downstairs, William Ernest. You're sick. I wet, he said sadly. I couldn't help it. She sighed. I know, when you're sick, you just can't help it. She got him the last clean underwear, which was short and wouldn't be as warm, and changed his sheets. She took a dry blanket off her own bed. He climbed in and turned his back to her once, his strength exhausted. Gilly, honey, Trotter called drowsily as Gilly passed her door. You got company down there. Just playing the TV, Gilly smoothed her hair and tugged out her shirt as she went down the stairs. She knew she looked a wreck. She must have shocked the poor old lady right out of her socks. The woman gave a weak smile and nodded when Gilly came in. "You poor little thing," she said. Gilly looked behind to see if W.E. had followed her down. "Bless your heart." There was no one else around. "Me?" "Courtney didn't exaggerate. I'm just so glad you wrote her, my dear. How could they have put you in such a place?" "Me?" What was the woman talking about? What place? "I know I shouldn't have burst in upon you like this, but I thought I had to see for myself before I talked with your caseworker. Will you forgive me, my dear, for—" There was a heavy thump, thump, thumping on the stairs. Both of them sat stark still and listened as it drew inexorably nearer. "Oh!" the little lady gasped. Swaying in the doorway was a huge barefoot apparition in striped men's pajamas, gray hair cascading over its shoulder, a wild look in its eyes. "I forgot!" it was moaning as it swayed. "I forgot!" It grabbed frantically at the woodwork. "I forgot!" Gilly sprang to her feet. "What did you forget?" "The turkey." Trotter was almost sobbing now. $15.38. I let it go to rot. She gave no sign that she noticed the visitor. "Nothing's gone to rot. I would have smelled it, wouldn't I?" Gilly couldn't help sneaking a sideways glance at the little woman who looked almost as frightened as W.E. did when he spied a new word in his reading book. "Go back to bed, Trotter. I'll put it right in the oven." The huge woman made an effort to obey, but nearly fell down just trying to turn around. "I better set a minute," she panted. "My head's light." Gilly grabbed the back of the striped pajamas with both hands and half dragged, half supported the faltering frame towards the couch. But she knew, just as one knows when piling on one final block that the tower will fall. She knew they couldn't make it. "Oh, mercy!" Trotty gave a little cry as she came crashing down, pinning Gilly to the rug beneath her. The woman lay there, flapping on her back like a giant, overturned tortoise. "Well, I done it now." She gave a short, hysterical giggle. "Squish, you're juicy." "What? What is it?" The third night-clothed actor had made his entrance. "You all right, ain't you, Gilly, honey?" asked Trotter, and without waiting for an answer, "'S all right, Mr. Randolph." "But someone fell. I heard someone fall." "Yeah, I fell all right." Trotter was rocking her huge trunk in a vain effort to get to her feet. "But it's okay, ain't it, Gilly, honey?" "Just roll, Trotter," said a muffled voice. "Roll over and you'll be off of me." "What's that? What's that?" Mr. Randolph squeaked. "It's poor little Gilly," Trotter grunted, and with a supreme "ah," rolled off onto the floor. "Miss Gilly?" he was asking anxiously. "I'm okay, Mr. Randolph." Gilly got up, dusted herself off, then took him by the hand. "Let's get you back into bed." By the time she returned from the dining room, Trotter had somehow hoisted herself into a sitting position on the couch, and dizzily clutching the cushions with both hands, had found herself face to face with a white-faced stranger. "You said wasn't no one here," she accused Gilly. The visitor, for her part, was teetering on the absolute brink of the brown chair in what Gilly took to be a state of total shock. But the small lady proved capable of speech. I think I'd better go," she said, standing up. "I don't seem to have come at a very good time." Gilly followed her to the door, eager to get her out of the loony bin the house had suddenly become. "I'm glad to have met you," she said as politely as she could. She had no wish for that woman to think poorly of her. After all, she was, or at least she claimed to be, Courtney's mother. The woman paused, resisting Gilly's effort to hurry her out the door. She reached over abruptly and pet Gilly on the cheek. "I'll get you out of here soon," she whispered fiercely. "I promise you I will." Fatigue had made Gilly stupid. She simply nodded and closed the door quickly behind the little form. It wasn't until she gotten Trotter back in bed and was putting the turkey in the oven that the word's meaning came clear. Oh, no. Well, it didn't matter what the woman thought. Miss Ellie could explain about today. No one could make her leave here, not when everyone needed her so. Besides, Trotter wouldn't let them take her. Never, she had said. Never, never, never. The next chapter is called Never and Other Canceled Promises. Dread lay on Gilly's stomach like a dead fish on the beach. Even when you don't look at it, the stink pervades everything. She finally made herself admit the fact that it was her own letter that had driven Courtney to get in touch with her mother after a silence of 13 years. What had it said? She couldn't even remember what the letter had said, and Courtney's letter had in turn brought the little lady up from Virginia to spy her out. And now what? It was not at all the way she had imagined the ending. In Gilly's story, Courtney herself came sweeping in like a goddess queen, reclaiming the long-lost princess. There was no place in this dream for dumpy old-fashioned ladies with southern speech, or barefoot fat women in striped pajamas, or blind old black men who recited poetry by heart and snored with their mouths open, or crazy, heart-ripping little guys who went pow and still wet their beds. But she had done it. Like Bluebeard's wife, she opened the forbidden door, and some day she would have to look inside. By Saturday night, when the turkey was finally opened, the kitchen table, with the four of them gathered gratefully around it, there was still no word from either Miss Ellie or the Commonwealth of Virginia. Trotter and W.E. looked deathly white, and Mr. Randolph was the shade of ashes, but they had thrown off the crankiness of their illness and were eating the cold, dry meat with chirpy expressions of delight. I declare, Miss Gilly, you are the only person I know who can rival Miss Trotter's culinary skill. A statement Gilly knew for a bald-faced, a kindly intended lie. The potatoes are lumpy, she responded, doing some tardy mashing with the tines of her fork. Mine ain't lumpy, W.E. whispered loyally. They're just fine, Gilly, honey. I think you gave yourself the only lump in the pot. Mine's smooth as ice cream. I didn't know how long it's been. Trotter paused, head tilted as though reaching far back into memory. I don't think food's tasted this good to me since before Melvin took sick the last time. She beamed, having delivered the ultimate compliment. Gilly blushed just by herself. They were all liars, but how could you mind? Gilly, honey, Trotter stopped a forkful in midair. Who was that woman that came here the other day? What'd she want? Now it was Gilly's turn to lie. Well, I think she was about to ask us to join her church, but before I could tell her about being faithful Baptists, all of you came roaring in looking like three-day-old death, scared her straight out the door. Me too? Asked W.E. You were the worst one, William Ernest. She saw you standing there all tall, white, and skinny, calling my name. Gilly! Gilly! She nearly swallowed her dentures. Really? Would I lie? Pow, he said. Well, she sure got up and hightailed it when I came in and bulldozed poor Gilly clean through the carpet, Trotter snickered. I reckon she thought she was fixin' to be next. What do you do? Asked W.E. I fell smack down on Gilly and couldn't get back up for the life of me. Mr. Randolph was giggling. I was awakened by a terrible crash. I came as fast as I could. Then all you could hear was this little squeak. Roll off me, Trotter, roll off me. Trotter repeated herself, getting nearer to hysterics with each repetition. Roll off me. Did you roll off her? Mercy, boy, it weren't that easy. I huffed and I puffed. And you blew the house down. William Ernest pounded the table, and they all laughed until the tears came taking turns to cry out, Roll off me, and not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Roll off me was not what Gilly remembered saying, but it didn't matter. It was so good to have them all well, laughing and eating together. Besides, in their merriment, the little gray-haired lady had slipped from her thoughts. But Monday came, and the long holiday weekend was over. Gilly armed with an absent excuse that looked more like a commendation for bravery in battle, and William Ernest, cheerful but pale, went back to school. Mr. Randolph moved home again, and Trotter, taking time to rest every few minutes, began to straighten up the house. And as Gilly learned later, by the time Miss Ellie reached her desk at 12 after 9, there was already a note upon it directing her to call a Miss Rutherford Hopkins in Loudoun County, Virginia. Gilly had waited after school at William Ernest's classroom door. She didn't want him taking on any fights while he was still wobbly from the flu, and she knew with her reputation that no one would sneeze in his direction if he were walking with her. Agnes Stokes danced along beside them, trying to entice Gilly to join her in the trip to the deli, but Gilly was too intent on getting W.E. home. Or we could go to my house and call people on the phone and breathe weird. Come off it, Agnes. That's so dumb. No, it really scares them. I had them screaming all over the place at me. It is dumb, Agnes. Dumb, dumb, dumb. You always say that when you don't think it up yourself. Right, I don't think up dumb things. Come on, Gilly, let's do something. You ain't done nothing with me for a long time. And that is where we're going to stop today. So Miss Gilly seemed like she was quite the caretaker for everyone while they were sick. when we first met Gilly, that would have been very hard to believe. Alright, guys, so I will read some more tomorrow. I hope to see you and hear from you soon. Bye, guys.